The world's three best-known comic book heroes, the Bat, the Spider, and the Man of Steel, are all united in the fact that they were orphans, with their origin story including defining moments of parental loss. I want to take a deeper look at the psychological consequences of such a loss for each hero. There are many different interpretations of these characters, and in their retelling, what motivates and drives them can vary. I will therefore stick to looking at their on-screen adaptations. Superheroes show us that adversity can be overcome, and Bruce Wayne is driven by his traumatic experience. The life event stress checklist for children places losing a parent at the very top of that list. Having witnessed the shootings of his parents, Bruce would have been left scared and alone in that alleyway with their bodies, waiting for police to arrive. 20% of trauma survivors develop PTSD, and finding value or purpose from tragedy can be critical in the aim of post-traumatic growth. You see this in real-world settings. 5,000 more people signed up for the army in 2002, following the attacks of 9/11, and those who have suffered the loss of a loved one following a terminal illness often assist in some form of charity to ease the suffering of others. For Bruce, purpose was to be found in preventing traumatic crimes like this from happening to other families. Michael Uslan, the executive producer of The Dark Knight Rises, said this in his book, The Boy Who Loved Batman. Bruce Wayne died the night of his parents' death. Bruce Wayne doesn't exist. Batman was the one who walked away from Crime Alley the night his parents were shot. In Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, Bruce's parents are shot having left an opera at his request. The film focuses on the theme of fear, and Batman's persona stems from Bruce's fear of bats. Having had fallen into a well, an unconditioned fear response was produced by an unlearned stimulus, as he was startled by the bats. This develops into a conditioned fear response at the sight of anything bat-like, such as masks at the opera. Batman later turns this fear on the criminals of Gotham. Consequences for fear are greater for Bruce. Whilst he learns to master his own fear, it is clear that he lives with survivor's guilt. He blames himself for the death of his parents and suffers from nightmares, flashbacks, and isolation as a result.
Yes, Master Bruce?
It was my fault, Alfred. I made them leave the theater.
No.
If I hadn't gotten scared.
It was nothing that you did. It was him, and him alone. Do you understand?
For Peter Parker, the death of Uncle Ben was indirectly his fault. He is immediately called to act when he finds Uncle Ben, as he knows his killer cannot be far from him. Like Superman, Spider-Man already has his powers at the time of his loss, but he sees the consequences of only using his powers for personal gain. Words spoken by Uncle Ben become his moral code.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Spider-Man's loss is a consequence of choosing to be passive rather than active in his approach, and so this guilt is built around this inaction. When he looks upon the face of the man who killed Uncle Ben, he sees that he could have easily prevented the death of the man who raised him had he acted earlier. He comes up with the narrative that he's at fault, and in The Amazing Spider-Man he goes on a personal vendetta with the criminals of New York, who match the description of his uncle's killer.
You like beating on girls? You like beating on old men?
Hey pal, just keep on walking. You're in the wrong place, buddy.
When was the last time you were in Queens?
Psychologist Rosenberg said that Superman is her poster person for psychological health, despite experiencing trauma. In the Man of Steel interpretation of Superman, and in the 1978 Superman film, Clark Kent learns a different lesson from tragedy.
All those powers. And I couldn't even save him.
In the original film, Jonathan Kent dies of a heart attack, and Clark learns the hard lesson that despite his gifts, he cannot save everyone, that death is a part of human life. It humanizes him. He's reminded he's not a god. In Man of Steel, Jonathan dies from a tornado. Natural disasters do just happen, much like illnesses. Whilst already gifted with powers, Pa Kent sacrifices himself, believing that in doing so, he is saving his son. Despite Clark's own beliefs, He knew that his son was not yet ready to handle the pressures of the outside world, scrutinizing him for being a superpowered alien. We see the reality of this unfolding in Batman vs. Superman. In both interpretations, Jonathan Kent's death shows Superman that he has his limits, but in the Man of Steel version, Clark is also taught the necessity of sacrifice and restraint. The loss of Jonathan Kent is the catalyst for his travels. Man of Steel's interpretation of Superman brings his story closer to that of Batman and Spider-Man's origin story. All three have origins framed within a tragedy, and all three were passive in the dying of their parents, or parental figures. And all three may be inspired to help others by guilt. For each of our heroes, their view of the world was shaken by their loss, and this marked the starting point for what they would go on to achieve as they transitioned from victim to superhero. Just world theory is the belief that the world is naturally just. It's why people are inclined to blame victims. Our heroes reach the conclusion that justice occurs, but it needs their help. They take an active role in creating justice, ready to set aside their short-term self-interests, and are better able to stay motivated while working hard to satisfy long-term and less self-serving goals. In Batman Begins, Bruce approaches Falcone and sees for himself that the system is corrupt, that evil can corrupt the good.
Look around you. You'll see 2 councilmen, a union official, a couple off-duty cops, and a judge. Now, I wouldn't have a second's hesitation of blowing your head off right here and right now in front of them. Now, that's power you can't buy. That's the power of fear.
I'm not afraid of you.
Bruce feels the need to see justice happen on his own, and believes that as a symbol, as Batman, he can use his own resources to attack the corruption in a way he could not as a man. Bruce establishes his own moral code and decides that he can honor his parents' values even through means which they might have disapproved. Spider-Man feels the same responsibility to help others and knows that his powers allow him to help where others cannot.
No, I'm not saying he's a hero. I don't think he's a hero at all.
What are you trying to say?
I'm saying he's trying to help, and it looks like he's trying to do something maybe the police can't.
His suit offers him the freedom to act for others, to honor his uncle's last lesson.
With great power comes great responsibility. Remember that, Pete. Remember that.
All three heroes feel different to others due to their unusual personal history. They feel disconnected by their loss and by their own secrets. Peter Parker felt like an outsider at high school for being physically weak and also a genius, and then in adult life for having superpowers. Their differences mean that they don't act as part of the in-group. Others don't belong in their category, and so they remove themselves from our world. Or, when they exist around other people, they have to keep that part of themselves that make them different a secret. Superman has grown up disconnected from his homeland, and in some respect, burdened by his powers. He's had to hide rather than stand out. He's the last of his kind, and that's why he feels pain in killing Zod. And it is in this knowledge that he wants to feel connected to those on Earth, which is why he tries to save everyone. Without parents to love and accept him, to hold him accountable for his actions, Bruce Wayne becomes a child of the world and sets out to grow into a man who can make a change. As with Superman, by leaving the world where tragedy occurred, they get to separate themselves physically from their loss and suffering before donning the cape to prevent others from experiencing the same loss. Christopher Nolan's Batman is without Robin or the Justice League, and while there are those who he relies on for assistance, his life as Bruce Wayne is devoid of many of the relationships we usually rely on. He has no close friends, no stable female relationships, and only truly reveals himself to his butler, Alfred. His world becomes one absent of love, except of that from the
Since I
butler.
first heard his cries echo through this house.
All of our heroes are shaped by others on the journey to become superheroes, and not just by the trauma itself. They are both products of nature and of nurture. Spider-Man had Uncle Ben and Aunt May, and his upbringing taught him how to be a hero when the opportunity came.
There's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble. and finally allows us to die with pride. Even though sometimes we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most. Even our dreams.
Batman has a number of influential men in his life. Each occupy a different role in his life, and Father has different personas in business, in relationships, in protecting Gotham, and in becoming the Bat. Who Bruce knew his parents to be, and the motivation for what he does never leaves him, even when tested.
Anger does not change the fact that your father failed to act.
The man had a gun.
Would that stop you?
I've had training.
The training is nothing. The will.
And when Wayne Manor is turned to ash, it is the words of Thomas Wayne that Alfred chooses to echo.
Why do we force? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
You still haven't given up on me.
Never.
Comic book writer Jeff Jones wrote, "If baby Kal-El had fallen into the hands of a lesser man, the world would be a lesser place." This applies to both Kents, as they provide him with the moral lessons he needed to operate amongst humanity. Superman carries both the lessons from Pa Kent and from the AI of Jor-El. He knows it is his choice to be the hero, and he rises to the occasion. So how have they grown from the tragedies? Bruce found strength in vengeance, and he devotes his life to stopping Gotham's corruption. Spider-Man found purpose, and Superman learnt the hard lesson that he cannot save everyone, that sacrifice and restraint are essential to both his own survival and that of others. The lessons he learned ready him to be Earth's saviour, to become a symbol for hope and to make the ultimate sacrifice when called to it. At the end of The Dark Knight, Batman sacrifices his own reputation to preserve the image of Harvey Dent. He spends his life in service of others, acting for what he believes to be the greater good. He sacrifices his own personal happiness to defeat the villains and honour his parents.
Then I found out about your mask.
Batman's just a soldier.
No, this is your mask.
His parents' death is both his driving force and his crutch. In BVS, we see a darker Batman, one who has lost so much that he turns to darker methods to fight crime. He's losing his way. It is then in the climatic scene where he's going to kill Superman that the name Martha, his own mother's name, grounds him.
What does that mean? Why did you say that name?
Find him! Save Martha!
His parents are the reason he put on the mask, and in that moment, it is the memory of his mother that stops him from becoming the villain. Superman offers Batman the opportunity to save his own mother. Batman gets to fulfill his purpose, to do what he promised to do in the alleyway all those years ago.
It's okay. I'm a friend of your son.
Thanks for watching this essay. There's a lot to cover and I know I haven't touched upon it all. The work of Travis Langley and Dr. Rosenberg were instrumental in my research, and highly recommend you check them out. They certainly make some points better than I will have.